One of the key events in India's history between 1750 and 1950 was the Battle of Plassey on June 23rd. The Battle of Plassey was fought because of the increasing control the British were implementing in Calcutta and Siraj's desire to take that control back. Prior to this battle, the British company was interfering with local prophets, establishing fortifications with guns, pew, 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 and developing a larger community in Calcutta. The East India Company was also granted permission to not have to perform custom duties by the Mughal Empire. The Indians also believed that they could use the British as allies against other local rulers, but as the Battle at Plassey proves, the British had other ideas in mind. Siraj was a Nawab of India who came into power in 1756. Shortly after this, he ordered for the British military organizations in Calcutta to be destroyed as he saw it as a threat to his success and power. The East India Company refused, and so Siraj captured Calcutta. The East India Company wanted Calcutta back and took it back through the battle at Plassey. A couple of months later, and Rachel Pearl just threw something at me. It was rumored that when Siraj took Calcutta in 1756, he imprisoned 123 to 146 British, and all but 23 were dead the next day. But I survived! This incident was called the Black Hole of Calcutta and was influential in the decision of the British to battle Siraj. The battle at Plassey only lasted for a few hours. On the front line of the British side was Robert Clive. Only 23 people on Clive's side died in the battle. Indian sepoys were a big factor in the victory of Clive. Sepoys are Indian soldiers in the service of European power. In the Battle of Plassey, Siraj had 50,000 soldiers, and the British had only 3,000. Siraj was so easily defeated, though, because of the 3,000 on the British side. And you might be wondering by now, why is she talking in a horrible, fake British accent? And it's to bring home the fact that the British took over India. 2,100 of them were Indian sepoys. Clive also had Indian spies that gave him information on the system of Siraj's ranks. When they started that battle, Siraj's main people and friends that he relied on surrendered, threw away their weapons, and even fought against Siraj. Even Siraj's granduncle, Mir Jafar, turned against him and fought for the British side. As a result of the battle at Plassey, Siraj was killed on July 2nd. 22 people were killed on Clive's side and 1,000 on Siraj's. Another result was that the Clive took over the administration in Bengal. Mir Jafar had agreed to help the British if he could become Nawab of Calcutta. When he became Nawab, though, he was under Clive's control. Mir had to give all of the French factories in Bengal to Clive and had to pay large amounts of money to him in prize money. Mir didn't have that much money, though, so he had to tax all of the people of India. All of this money resulted in a shift of the economic status of the population from wealth to poverty, and 1/3 of the population dying of starvation in 1769 and 1770. I'm so hungry. Clive became the governor of Bengal in 1765, and the East India Company had complete control over Bengal and areas surrounding it. Without any French in Calcutta and complete control over it, the British used Bengal as the heart of their operation in expanding in India and making more profit. The British developed more and more territories until they had an empire bigger than the Roman Empire. And by the way, it's very hard to talk in a fake British accent very fast like John Green while bouncing on an exercise ball. This is Jenna Brooker, peace and out. Over to you, Rachel Pearl.
And now, a live open letter from Haley York about the Indian Rebellion of 1857. When the British came to India, they brought education, road systems, and etc., but they treated the Indians as other people, like they treat them as more humans than slaves, but they didn't have human rights. After some time, the educated Indians decided to discuss the British about giving India their own government and also higher job opportunities. India wanted to gain independence from Britain due to the fact that the British kept increasing taxes, which caused financial problems. The educated Indians wanted to have higher job opportunities, but the British disagreed, which led to protests, and key leaders came to India to get British out. Indian National Congress refused to support Britain in the war unless they promised India independence. After war, the British could not keep India. Hindu and Muslim conflicts in India intensify as independence grows near. Finally, India National Congress refused to support Britain in the war unless they promised India independence. After war, the British could not keep India. Hindu and Muslim conflicts in India intensify as independence grows near. Finally, India wanted to run their own government and got the British out at the same time. After the end of British rule, the two countries became independent after India helped the British. After the war, the two countries that came from the original India had the Hindu majority become India and the majority of Muslim become Pakistan. And then Gandhi. Gandhi was a protester who started protesting about ill treatment of non-whites in South Africa. Then in 1915 he returned to India to convince the British to leave. He has believed in non-violent protests, and an example is he led the Dahandi March where Gandhi defied the law by making salt to protest against tax on salt. P.S. The British didn't like peaceful protesters, so they just clubbed them to death. India split into two, having the Hindu majority becoming India and the Muslim majority becoming Pakistan. There's still protests going on in the 1930s and during the Second World War. India still sent and paid the British Empire during the war. Later in 1942, the British offered a dominion status in India for full cooperation, but there were so many restrictions that the Indian National Congress denied their offer. Gandhi and other national leaders still demand independence without violence. After the war, protests increased, and Hindu and Muslims still have tension today. After British rule in India has ended, the tension between India and Pakistan still was around and getting more intense. India still wanted to fight the British to keep them away, which costs lots of money and lives. Soon the two countries went to war for religious demographics.
India has just earned their independence, and India and Pakistan split because of religious demographics. When India and Pakistan split into separate countries, the princely states of India were forced to join one or the other. Most of these princely states joined one or the other, like normally, without any conflict. The Kashmir War started because British policy held that the various princely states would have to accede to either Pakistan or India based on geographic location and demographics. While many of the states easily joined their appropriate country, Kashmir and two other states presented special problems. Kashmir was strategically located between India and Pakistan. Though Kashmir was mostly Muslim, the majority of the population, including a majority within the Muslim population, did not support joining Pakistan and instead wished to join India or form independence from the two states. Muslims revolted and Pakistan supported their revolt, but the Maharaja, which is the Indian prince, pleaded with India for military help, and in return, they would join India. The start of the war began in October 1947 when tribal people, along with the help of Pakistani forces, led an incursion into the Valley of Kashmir. They were very successful at the start of the war and forced the Indian prince to flee the capital. The Indian prince asked India for military support, and in return, they would accede to India. With the help of Indian forces, they had many early successes in the war, but many Indian soldiers were not prepared for the cold, mountainous region of Kashmir. Because of these setbacks, the Pakistani-backed forces were able to push back Indian forces, causing them to go to the United Nations and ask them to have a ceasefire line, which occurred in December 1948. When the United Nations declared a ceasefire line, Kashmir was dissolved. But not me. Pakistan took control of about 2/5 of the land, where India took the rest of it. As a result of this conflict, at least 1,500 people died on each side. And finally, in 1957, the area became the state of Jammu and Kashmir in the Indian Union. This was the first of 3 more wars between Pakistan and India over Kashmir. It is also the start of many conflicts between the two. The key people of this event were the Indian Prince of Kashmir, Hari Singh, because he's the one that agreed to join India with the military help. The person who Hari Singh went to when they needed military assistance from India was the Governor General Louis, I can't read that last name. The Prime Minister of India at the time was another name I cannot read, Jawaharlal Nehru. The Prime Minister of Pakistan at the time was Liaquat Ali Khan. During the time of the war, World War II had just ended and the Cold War had just begun. Because of this, outside countries were not really interested in India and Pakistan's personal business, and were more worried about getting bombed than helping them fight their war. So no one gave aid to either of these countries during the War of 1947, but many countries, such as the Soviet Union, United States, and China, had given aid to to some of them in preceding wars and conflicts.
So what happened to India, Chippy?
India went through a lot of change between 1750 and 1950. They started out just being a British trading company, and then British took over, and they were British colonies. They revolted and eventually became independent, only to split and become India and Pakistan, and then fight over territory. The major theme we chose for this time period in India was independence, because most of this time period is when they are under British rule and are trying to gain their independence.
That's exactly what I was thinking.